All right, can everyone see the chapter 4 slides, David Banks and Xander Mosley? Can everyone see those okay? All right, so basically we've got one group presenting face-to-face. We've got another group presenting via Teams. So if it's all right with everyone, just to kind of keep things nice and simple, I'll just have the discussion for the people face-to-face. That'll just happen face-to-face. And if you're watching us via Teams, you can present in the next discussion. Just because the audio is not great to pick everyone up inside the classroom, I apologize for that. I just think that's the best way to go. As always, I'm a big fan of market participation and market setting the price of things. So like we did last class, this will be worth 5 points to participate. So I'd certainly encourage you to participate. Certainly it'd be 5 points on exam 2. Probably be a good thing for a lot of people. So apart from that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to David and Xander. They're going to go first. Then we'll turn it over to Justin and his partner. You might have to click inside the second screen. I'm not sure.
All right.
And if you could kind of stand in front of the microphone, it's on the laptop. So.
Oh, okay. I got you. All right. So this chapter was about the one-to-many relationship, and then over some SQL commands. The image here is just a one-to-one or a one-to-many relationship that I found that goes from a mother to her children, just showing that you have one mother and she can have a whole bunch of children.
But only one child. Sorry, but a child can only have one mother.
One mother, yeah. One biological mother, that is. Now, this one-to-many relationship, what it does is it, relates one thing to a lot of things, and then that back on that group of a lot of things back to only one thing. And this is used in a hierarchical kind of setup. I think we got something on that one next slide. The 3 commands that I saw and thought were probably the most useful was the join command, the group by, and the having command. Join using to combine 2 tables into one table based off of a similar column. Group by being able to sort by one specific area, and then having, like, requiring something from that group to show up.
So our case example for companies that use the one-to-many relationship is Ford. They have assembly plants in 17 different countries, and with that knowledge, it would be safe to assume that they need a strict hierarchy of chain of command, because this allows easier reporting of information up the chain of command.
This is easiest to be shown by, like, we'll take one specific, we'll have Ford as a whole. They'd be a one-to-many to all of their plants. Inside the plant, it'd be the plant to, like, a overall plant manager, the plant manager to his under, like, the people under him, and then to the floor level and go all the way down. That way it just stays nice and neat throughout the whole entire database.
This example is administrative expenses of Ford for the last 5 years. You can see it's been generally going down since 2015. There was a large decrease in 2016, but in the general direction of down, it's been going that way. One could attribute it to proper database management, even though they're an expanding company.
All right, so that's all we have for the start of that. So we're going to move on to the discussion portion of this.
And just to remind everyone, if you're participating face-to-face, this is the discussion you presented. If you're watching us virtually, if you wouldn't mind just holding your discussion until next chapter, which is the same chapter, so it's chapter 4. That way we can make sure that everyone has a chance to participate and we don't have any audio issues.
All right, so our first question that we have is, what are the financial benefits of using a one-to-many relationship? Like inside their own, like inside their databases, like inside their database whenever they're like organizing information.
Yeah, for example, one company has many departments. Those departments have many employees, but one employee can only belong to one department, and those departments can only belong to that company. So one large to many small.
Mm-hmm. What are financial drawbacks of using this relationship? Mhm. Yeah. Uh, yeah. The only drawback that I really saw would be for if you have information that needs to go to multiple different areas, you might have to send it out a couple different times to get it all there.
Yeah, let me jump in on this one
Yeah.
if I can. I think that another pretty substantial drawback is, when you're talking about the one-to-many, you have the capability to have lots of data, but you may not actually have lots of data.
Mhm.
So the marginal cost is going to be quite low to add additional records, but you have a very high fixed cost. So if you have a high fixed cost, what does that mean for economy of scale? Is you got to have a large amount for it to be financially meaningful. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be, but certainly if you're a firm that has one employee, let's say just a small family business or whatever, probably wouldn't make sense to use a one-to-many relationship inside of a database. You may not even have a database at all at that point. Whereas if you're a multinational firm, it'd be nearly impossible to maintain competitiveness and to not use databases, just because the transactional costs, when you look at the marginal cost, are going to be pretty substantial, particularly if you're dealing with smaller value transactions. So I think it depends upon the marginal cost more than anything in this.
All right. The next question is, where can technology benefit from the use of this one-to-many relationship? All right. Well, the main benefit that I really see from it is just the overall. If you're a large enough corporation where you need to use one, just the ease of how everything is set up. It's a really easy just setup overall.
And then the next question is, where does technology fall short in the use of one-to-many relationships? I could see it falling short in places where you need to have possibly maybe an employee works in two different departments. Maybe not every employee, but maybe some employees.
I feel like it can be used like incorrectly sometimes. Like using it when it's not actually necessary makes it more too much information going through one spot.
Yeah, I can see that. If something as small as a typo were to go through and the keys were not listed as primary in the hierarchical tables, then I could see an update anomaly happening where they try to update something and not everything gets updated because one or two, maybe 100 records have the wrong department.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, you're right.
Let's just kind of add what was interesting. I think you brought up an excellent point about it's all about how you specify the relationship. So if you specify it incorrectly, there's no way the technology can tell you specified this relationship incorrectly. So it's really all about getting the modeling part of it done properly. If you get the modeling part done properly, you represent it well, then you'll be able to build upon it and have a meaningful database. But if you don't, then that's where the technology can kind of fall short, is that it can't tell you specify this relationship incorrectly. That's purely by business rules. Did you collect the appropriate information from the stakeholders to determine what the business rules should be for this? That's a yes or no question. If you didn't, well, then you're going to have problems. If you did, then it'll be pretty straightforward. I mean, it's just a matter of implementing the database as you would go about according to the model. So that's really how technology falls short.
All right. So where do people benefit from using this one-to-many relationship? Hmm. Mhm.
So where do one-to-many relationships fall short from the people's perspective? One example I could see is possibly if some employees need to transfer data over to another department that they don't work in, I could see issues going there because they'd either have to go directly to the other department or they'd have to go up to their manager and then the manager reports to that department or transfers.
Mhm. And then, like with that, I mean, the more times you transfer something, the more likely the information is to get miscommunicated somewhere along the line. I mean, I think we've all played the game telephone, so it's just like that. You have to go through 15 people to get to where you need to be. Higher chance of something messing up.
Jump in there as well. I think that it could be from a people's perspective. A lot of people don't understand what a one-to-many relationship is. And we put that into a data model. They may visually see it and they could say this is one-to-many, but do they understand what that means for how we input data? That we have to match, and have one record can associate with many of another entity. So I think that can be kind of confusing for a lot of people. And from a business standpoint, you have to communicate that well. You have to ensure that the department and the team that are going to be working within the database, they understand what that means and how they can go about using it effectively. So I'm not saying it's a downside, but it certainly can be if it's not managed appropriately.
All right, well, that's all we have. So I say thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. So, like I was saying, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Basically, thanks for sitting through. If you're watching us via Teams, now we're going to turn it over to Justin. And who's your partner, Justin? I think you're muted.
Ben Santiago.
All right, so we're going to turn it over to you guys. If one of you guys will just share your slides, we'll get started. And like I say, to earn the 5 points, you have to unmute yourself and speak. So I'll make sure to keep an eye on that, and we should be in a good spot. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you all.
Can you share the slides?
Can I share them?
Yeah. Can you?
Okay. Let me see 1 second. Can you see it now?
Yeah. Just present those and then we'll do it. Okay. That present button.
Where's that? Oh,
Right.
I'm bad with this.
No, you're good. All right. So we're doing chapter 4 as well. I'm Ben Santiago and my partner is Justin Masters, and this is the one-to-many relationship. Next slide. So entities are not isolated. They're all related to other entities in some way in a database. And this is how the one-to-many relationship is shown. It is one straight line going into crow's feet to the many part. Next slide. Something that can occur with the one-to-many relationship are update anomalies. And what it could be like doubling up data, and sometimes the data will be deleted completely, which will delete something else. This is the insert anomaly. And it'll create a null point. So you need something to be inserted there. So that's an anomaly that could happen. And delete anomaly could lead to like you delete one of the many parts to the one, and it would and it only has one part, so it would delete the whole entire one part as well as the many parts, and that's not good for your data either. Next slide. Creating a database with a one-to-many relationship and one table. There's a table in the book that represents this, and one of them is NAT code, and it's the one in the table where it is a foreign key, and then another table is a primary key. They both use the same information, but one is a primary key, one is a foreign key, and that's how the one-to-many relationship is created. Next slide. Two keys have the same name, but it's not mandatory. They can have the same name for some. If they cannot have the same name for some reason, they must be qualified. And qualifying is like putting a prefix on your label so that it can be distinguished. So like there's a table called nation.nat code and stock.nat code. It's still the same information, but it's split up into both tables so it can have the same name, kind of. All right.
All right, and for our case, we'll be using fictitious school, Wilbur Elementary. We're going to be going over like the data table for their course codes versus teachers. So each teacher has an individual teacher ID code right here. And so each individual teacher has a different one, but you have to make sure that the teachers with the same names don't have the same ID code. Then the teacher ID code is the same category for the course table over here, and each individual course has its own separate ID, but the same teacher can teach multiple courses, so that's equals the one-to-many relationships right there. Yeah, like no one teacher can be teaching the same class at the same time, so like spreading out the schedule, so you can like add more columns over here for like scheduled times for the classes. You can get more in detailed to the like the tables. Like you can add like homeroom over here, but as long as teacher ID and teacher ID match, then you can link both. You can like use both tables together. All right. Any questions?
All right, we can do our discussion questions then. So our first question is, what are some of the long-term drawbacks to using the one-to-many relationship system?
And if I can just jump in here, just to remind everyone, if you participate in this by unmuting yourself and speaking, it's 5 points. So if you're joining us via Teams, I'd certainly recommend you do that. And this will go on exam too.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, Justin, you got it.
What are some of the long-term drawbacks to using the one-to-many relationship system?
So I'll jump in here. Like we said, the last discussion, there's not necessarily a huge drawback, but you could certainly run into issues where people don't understand what's going on, or you could also run into issues where it doesn't make financial sense to do so, because when you look at the marginal cost, you have very high fixed costs. It's going to take quite a few records or specific instances of those entities for it to make financial sense to do it. So it's not something you would never do. It's just something it may not make sense to do in every case.
Yeah, an example of that being like if you were to expand the system later on to make it a many-to-many relationship system, that could cost time and money for the company, which would decrease the productivity of the company until that is fixed or like improved. Second question, do you think that the one-to-many relationship is necessary in database system management?
Obviously not in all databases, but certain use cases. I think it would be necessary. But...
Hello. Can
Hey.
you hear me? Oh, okay. I couldn't get my stuff to work. uh, the wait, huh, the question was what was it was what was the question again? Sorry.
You're
Do you,
good. Do you,
do you think that the one-to-many relationship is necessary in a database system?
I mean, in some like the example you had where you'd have to have a teacher, they would obviously most of the time be teaching more than one class. So I would guess in ones like that, yeah, it would be necessary.
All right.
cool. All right, next question. How do organizations benefit from using the one-to-many relationship?
I guess I'll jump in here again. Organizations benefit by being able to represent their data in a high fidelity and a well-formed way. So when we're talking about how we actually model our data, we want to model it appropriately. So however we go about that, if the relationship is in fact a one-to-many, then we're able to treat it as though it's a one-to-many. And we're able to kind of set that up using some various referential integrity constraints, stuff like that. It can be very beneficial to allow us to have a meaningful representation of our data.
All right. And for the fourth question, what can be a downfall of the system if the data is not requiring a separate entity?
Things could get crossed up, I guess. Like you, if it doesn't have like a specific entity, I'd imagine things would get a bit confusing.
Yeah, it's always better to keep it like simple as possible, and sometimes splitting up into two tables can cause more confusion and waste time for the company.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else want to jump in here? Keep in mind, this is 5 points on exam 2 coming up here, not too long. So if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free. And do you guys want to repeat the question for everyone?
What can be a downfall to the system if the data is not requiring a separate entity?
So there's certainly a lot of different types of anomalies we can see. We can see a insert anomaly where we insert stuff that's not already there. We can see an update anomaly where some places is updated, other places it's not. We can see a deletion anomaly where we delete a record and that's the only particular part of some other information we have, like we saw in the slides where we had the nation information for one specific stock that we held. We don't want to lose that information. Just a lot of different anomalies like that. Anyone else want to jump in here?
Yeah, that was our last discussion question, so hop on in.
I guess if the data doesn't require a different entity, that the data can be categorized in the wrong place when you're trying to retrieve the information.
All right, last call for anyone else. Well, guys, thanks for presenting. Good job. So if anyone has any questions about the homework, I can certainly take those now. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Like I say, feel free to go have a good